Assalamu Alaikum, everyone. Uh, so, we're going to be starting today from Surah 24 from the start. And God willing, I'll try to read up to verse 26 because I normally try to read about 2 pages. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Surah 24, Light Al-Nur. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. The surah that we have sent down and we have decreed as law. We have revealed in it clear revelations that you may take heed. Adultery. The adulteress and the adulterer, you shall whip each of them 100 lashes. Do not be swayed by pity from carrying out God's law, if you truly believe in God and the last day. And let a group of believers witness their penalty. And the footnote says social pressure, that is public witnessing of the penalty, is a basic punishment. See also 538. The lashing shall be symbolic, not severe. Okay. So these verses, first of all, this surah 24 is composed of, very detailed laws from the Quran. God has made this book complete, perfect, and fully detailed, as we know. And so God has set the laws of each and every aspect of our lives that is important for us, for our salvation. And all the commandments are here. And these verses specifically, talk about, God's laws relating to adultery and, other things that we'll get into. But, first starting with adultery, God has decreed that, the adulterer and the adulteress, you shall whip each of them 100 lashes. Now, first of all, people might be confused when they read the word adultery uh, in English because, in English, people tend to use different words for different categories of people that commit adultery. For example, if the adulterer, and I mean, if the people, having the sexual relations are, uh, you know, uh, married, there's a different word for it. If they're unmarried, there's a different word for it. But in the Quran, Quran, does not make a distinction among them, and basically, the Quran does basically say that, if the woman is a slave, then the punishment is different. If the woman is free, then the punishment is different. But it doesn't say if the woman's married, the punishment shall be different, and if the woman is unmarried or the man is married, you know. So, but in Arabic, there's a single word for sexual relations outside marriage, and that's zina. And so the punishment for that is 100 lashes for both the adulterer and the adulteress, both the people who commit the act. Doesn't matter who's married, who's not married. If these two people are not married together, they're, I mean, and they're not, uh, legally, each other's, then this is the punishment based on the Quran. And it's pretty clear. Now, God willing, and God says that, the social pressure is the basic punishment for adultery, right? When you have a group of believers, witnessing this act, of punishment, it's a humiliating thing to go through. And I mean, that really is what will deter people from doing that. Nobody wants to be embarrassed and lashed in front of 100 people, right? Any sensible person. So that's the real deterrent, not the punishment itself. And, what we see in the world today, how, they lash people so severely, but in the Quran, it says clearly the lashing shall be symbolic. Now, some people have taken it to another extreme, and they think that symbolic lashing means that you lash them with your tongue, like you just say you've committed a bad thing, but God doesn't trick us or anything like that. So the lashing is symbolic, meaning that the lashing shall not be severe, it's just there to show people, not there to like physically damage the person. uh, and that's the punishment. So verse 3, the adulterer will end up marrying an adulteress or an idol worshiper, and the adulteress will end up marrying an adulterer or an idol worshiper. This is prohibited for the believers. So, I mean, this is pretty clear. I mean, God has, created, uh, spouses for everyone, and God's law dictates that if someone's an adulterer, someone who has not taken care of respecting God's laws, and they're of that sort of a character, they will end up marrying someone who's the same character as them. And we see that happen a lot in the world today. Like you've commonly heard of people cheating on their wives, and the wives cheating back on their husbands, and so on. And then, yeah, of course, I mean, you have idol worshippers marrying idol worshippers. Of course, if you're an idol worshiper and you meet another idol worshiper, you share one thing in common, is you're both idol worshippers and you love your idols, and so you end up marrying each other. Even you could have different idols, but you'll end up having affinity towards each other because of your sinister personalities and your stupidity, I suppose, and you'll end up marrying them. Uh, Verse 4, those who accuse married women of adultery, then fail to produce 4 witnesses, you shall whip them 80 lashes, and do not accept any testimony from them. They are wicked. If they repent afterwards and reform, then God is forgiver, most merciful. As for those who accuse uh, their own spouses without any other witnesses, then the testimony may be accepted if he swears by God 4 times that he is telling the truth. The 5th oath shall be to incur God's condemnation upon him if he was lying. She shall be considered innocent if she swears by God 4 times that he is a liar. The 5th oath shall incur God's wrath upon her if he was telling the truth. This is God's grace and mercy towards you. God is Redeemer, most wise. So then it comes to God's law relating to accusations of adultery and how to deal with that. If someone accuses someone of adultery, they have to produce uh, witnesses. They have to produce 4 witnesses, and if they don't do that, then God says, "You shall whip them 80 lashes, and not accept any testimony from them," because that's God's law. Because otherwise, anybody could accuse anybody of adultery, right? If they didn't have to produce witnesses, and then make life difficult for them. So that's God's law in place to protect against that. Uh, Also, uh, God says that those who accuse their own spouses without any other witnesses, then the testimony may be accepted from them if he swears by God 4 times that he's telling the truth, and the 5th oath shall be to incur God's wrath upon him if he was lying, and the wife shall be considered innocent if she swears by God 4 times that he is a liar, and the 5th oath shall be to incur wrath upon her if he was telling the truth. So and then then that way the wife will be considered innocent if she does that. And this is also God's protection for the people against these kind of unproven accusations. There has to be an ample amount of proof available in order to, before you accuse someone of something like that. I mean, now I would say it's a different story If someone comes and says, hey, I committed adultery, you know, and then, I mean, if you already know and they're confessing that they committed adultery, then you don't have to produce witnesses, or they don't have to, like, if they come and say, I committed adultery, naturally, God doesn't say that if you say you committed adultery, you have to produce four witnesses for somebody to believe you, right? Because you're already confessing it with your own mouth. uh, but there are laws in place for when someone else accuses you. That's what should happen for you to believe them. You cannot say, well, no, I'm not going to believe you that you commit adultery. You have to produce four witnesses. But if you accuse someone else, then that someone else committed adultery, let's say another person's involved, then that's a different story, because someone could come with the bad intention and say, this woman, for example, had sexual relations with me or something, and then that way, she, somebody could try to tarnish her reputation, for example. So in those situations, of course, you have to keep in mind that obviously, someone who is being accused and claiming to be innocent, then in order for that to be proven, you have to have witnesses. And this is the law as far as the Quran is concerned. Uh, Verse 11: How to deal with rumors and unproven accusations. A gang among you produced a big lie. Do not think that it was bad for you. Instead, it was good for you. Meanwhile, each one of them has earned his share of the guilt. As for the one who initiated the whole incident, he has incurred a terrible retribution. When you heard it, the believing men and the believing women should have had better thoughts about themselves and should have said, this is obviously a big lie. This is obviously a big lie. Only if they produce four witnesses, you may believe them. If they fail to produce witnesses, then they are, according to God, liars. If it were not for God's grace towards you and his mercy in this world and the hereafter, you would have suffered a great retribution because of this incident. You fabricated it with your tongues, and the rest of you repeated it with your mouths without proof. You thought it was simple when it was, according to God, gross. And then the footnote says this refers to a historical incident where the Prophet's wife, Aisha, was left in the desert by mistake and later found by a young man who helped her catch up with the Prophet's caravan. This triggered the famous big lie against Aisha. And so as as the footnote says, this is what happened, and someone looked at it and they started, this rumor that, basically, Aisha committed adultery with this young man, and she was a wife of the Prophet, and God used that example in the Quran. I mean, it's seemingly a very bad thing, but God says, do not think it was bad for you. It was good for you, because it exposed a lot of people. It exposed their inner convictions and what they were hiding, and their expectations from a good believer, and God made it as a lesson for all of us to remember too, that people who that and as the subtitle says, how to deal with, it just doesn't talk about adultery, right? The subtitle is very generic. It says how to deal with rumors and unproven accusations. The believers are supposed to have better thoughts about each other, and when you hear rumors and unproven accusations, I mean, you're not supposed to believe them without having concrete evidence, and proof and witnesses, you know and in this case too, they shouldn't have believed him. They said this is a gross falsehood. And these people, and it happens, it's a common occurrence. People, spread lies about other people, and other people blindly believe them and make judgments about other people based on those lies without verifying them with the sources, even, without even asking the person, like, did you, like, say this or do this, uh, a lot of times, people end up just believing them and repeating them, and it ends up hurting obviously other people, and then let's say one person repeats it, another person, and then it goes rumors travel fast. So we should be considerate of this fact and not believe things on hearsay. A lot of times people could believe things like that and act upon those rumors and then end up being sorry and remorseful, as God says. So we should be careful. So verse 16 says what to do. When you heard it, you should have said, we will not repeat this. Glory be to you. This is a gross falsehood. God admonishes you that you shall never do it again if you are believers. God thus explains the revelations for you. God is omniscient, wise. Those who love to see immorality spread among the believers have incurred a painful retribution in this life and in the hereafter. God knows while you do not know. God showers you with his grace and mercy. God is most kind towards the believers, most merciful. Uh, Subtitle: The devil encourages
Yeah.
baseless accusations. I think somebody has their mic on. Okay, the devil encourages baseless accusations. O you who believe, do not follow the steps of Satan. Anyone who follows the steps of Satan should know that he advocates evil and vice. If it were not for God's grace towards you and his mercy, none of you would have been purified. But God purifies whomever he wills. God is hearer and knower. And those among you who are blessed with resources and wealth shall be charitable towards their relatives, the poor, and those who have immigrated for the sake of God. They shall treat them with kindness and tolerance. Do you not love to attain God's forgiveness? God is forgiver, most merciful. Um, so um, these verses basically are talking about one, not to follow the steps of Satan, because this is what Satan encourages. Satan encourages people to, uh, Satan encourages baseless accusations, So let's say you're in a group and, someone's you know, making these baseless accusations, and then there's other people that are encouraging them, right? You can be rest assured that these people are influenced by the devil, because that's what the devil does. He encourages these types of accusations, and God says, he only advocates evil and vice, and we can see that, the hypocrites, they advocate, evil and prohibit righteousness, and so we see that, when there's evil being spread, these people advocate it and encourage it, and when there's righteousness being spread, these people prohibit it, and I mean, we see that actually happening in real life, through people who claim to follow the Quran. Um, then, very important, God is talking to us about being charitable. Those people who are blessed with resources and wealth shall be charitable towards relatives, the poor, and those who have immigrated for the sake of God, and they should treat them with kindness and tolerance. Um, and that's a commandment, when you have a situation like that, you have to treat them, not only should you be charitable towards such people at those times, you should also be kind and tolerant towards them, because they're in a vulnerable position, they're going through a hardship, and we have to be kind and compassionate towards people in those situations. Obviously, these are does not include people who are God's enemies and they're fighting you and stuff like that. These are just normal people that, your relatives, people who have immigrated for the sake of God, and the poor. A lot of people who immigrate for the sake of God, will definitely, need charity and help, getting situated and everything. So we must help them as well. It's important. Gross sin, verse 23. Surely those who falsely accuse married women who are pious believers have incurred condemnation in this life and in the hereafter. They have incurred a horrendous retribution. The day will come when their own tongues, hands and feet will bear witness to everything they had done. On that day, God will requite them fully for their works, and they will find out that God is the truth. The bad women for the bad men, and the bad men for the bad women, and the good women for the good men, and the good men for the good women. The latter are innocent of such accusations. They have attained forgiveness and a generous reward. Okay, so from verse 23, we can see that accusing married women who are pious believers, is a gross falsehood, and obviously, if you truly believe in the hereafter, you will not do this because God says these people will incur terrible retribution and humiliation in this life and in the hereafter. And on the day of judgment, it talks about the videotape, where our hands, tongues, and feet will bear witness to everything they had done. So basically, everything is being recorded. We have angels around us that are keeping record of each and every move, and it's all being videotaped, and we'll have our record with us on the day of judgment. We can see everything, and it doesn't leave out anything. And so we have to be conscious of that, and because we're nothing is being unnoticed, and when people are cheating, whether it's adultery or cheating people with creating rumors about them and lies about them and spreading them, or doing some other things like that you just mentioned, obviously they're hurting themselves, and it's all being recorded for them. And if anybody truly believes in the hereafter, they will stay away from it. So God is warning us that people should be careful. And then God's an interesting thing about verse 26. It says, the good men and the good women. It says they're innocent of such accusations. If people make such accusations against them, that is wrong, because good men and good women would not do things like that naturally, right? And God says that the the bad men, like the verse I was reading earlier, which is verse 3, the adulterer will end up marrying an adulteress or an idol worshiper, and the adulteress will end up marrying an adulterer or an idol worshiper, right? So the opposite can be said about monotheists, and pious believers will end up marrying pious believers who are not adulterers and adulteresses, uh, and so that's why the good men for the good women, and the good women for the good men, and the bad men for the bad women, and the bad women for the bad men. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it from me. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free.
Yeah, sure. Jordan, very sure.
Masha Allah. Good study, praise God. A
Sure, thank
very
you.
crucial surah, and God's laws are described. And good job, Salãmun. MashaAllah. Thank God.
Thank you, Masha Allah. Pamela and them are on the road, so they're cutting in and out. So we need to
Okay.
ask questions.
Okay. Okay. It's our job today.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Pamela left it on us. All right. So there is one thing you mentioned about if somebody who say that they committed adultery um, and volunteer that information or confess in some way and do
Hmm.
not retract from it. So you said they 4 witnesses are not needed in that case.
Yeah, I mean, if someone says that, I had, you know,
Made a
had sex
mistake
with,
or that's it.
and stuff like that,
Hmm.
then you could believe them. But let's say if that doesn't involve another person, you didn't mention another person, right? I mean, I could believe them because, but if another person's involved, then you've accused someone of committing adultery, right? So we can't believe that when now that the person's accused, then there has to be witnesses involved. But if there's no accusation, someone just comes and confesses their own sin, then you believe them for doing that. If someone comes and says, I commit adultery in my old days, for example, and I slept with many people or whatever, I mean, I could say, okay, that's good. You can repent now and start new. But if someone says, I committed adultery with this person and this person, and then you can't, now they've accused these people by name that these people have committed adultery. So now I guess these rules would apply where, if somebody's being accused of adultery, so you have to produce witnesses in that case, in order for you to believe them, right? Like if a man comes and says, I committed adultery with this lady, you could pay someone, for example, if you resent someone, you could pay someone to, come and say this, for example, right? Just
Right.
to just to
Yeah,
tarnish
when
somebody's
another name
reputation,
is involved, then
right?
you have to verify that person.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah. Like
or
we know
not.
that this happened in history, right? When someone was being accused, just you could hire, let's say, a prostitute or someone like that, or a person, just pay them, and they can come and claim that someone tried to sexually assault me or something, you know and then
Yeah, yeah.
so then you can't believe them without having the witnesses.
But it is different between married couples, right? They can swear 4 times and
Hmm.
be out of it, right?
Yeah.
But if they accuse each other,
Yes, yeah, each other,
Hmm.
yes.
yeah, that's like, for example, if many times husband can be suspicious and say, "Oh, I'm sure you're having an affair and committing adultery," and the person says, "I swear to God, I'm not." You know, they say it 3 times or 4 times. Is it 4 times, Salman?
4 times, yeah.
That fifth time, breath? Yeah, they say it 4 times. And I believe it might not be just one in right away 4 times. Let's say this person has accused them 4 times without verification or witnesses, and they swore at God. The fifth time is this person is saying, and if they're wrong, then the wrath will befall upon them. That's how I understand. I mean, it could be at one day, or it could be at separate occasion. This person just, some husbands or wives can be very suspicious if person is going to their job or something, and they have this paranoia that this person is having an affair. They keep on saying that they should stop. It's to stop them too, like, do not go on, because you might bring a wrath upon yourself if the person is swearing at, upon, by God and saying that, and you're still doing it, and may have made it a like a norm of your life, then the wrath could be befallen on either one of them if they're lying fifth time.
Right. The way I'm reading it, it's like a one incident, you know. Let's say someone accuses you, so you have to swear, like you have to swear 5 times. The first 4 times you say, you know, you swear by God that they're telling the truth, and the fifth swearing shall be to incur God's condemnation upon them. You know, uh, if
I always thought it like that, but
mhm,
now I just when I was hearing it,
mhm.
but because there are people, and that has I've seen it. Make it a norm, like, oh, I think you're having an affair. I think you're having an affair, and the person, you know, let's say just they say it one time a day, 2 times a day, right? And the person swore at God that time, and then they say it few days later again.
Right, but I think this is talking about like not just a wife and husband having a discussion privately. You know, let's say like this comes up in a submitter nation. Let's say, you know, you bring your wife in and you say, you know, this woman committed adultery, and so in front of the jury, you know, before being punished, you know, in her defense, that this is what she does. You know, so this doesn't happen like every day, right? This will happen like maybe one time even, or maybe a
As
couple
a
of times, and
law,
then it
the
happens.
law.
Yeah, and then she shall be considered innocent if
Mm.
she swears 4 times and then fifth time, and then, you know, the case will be closed basically. You know, she doesn't have to be brought for lashing and stuff like that. But you know, like in a private setting, if a
Yeah,
husband
I'm
keeps
saying,
having
yeah, no,
suspicious,
that part I understood,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if you, I'm just saying that in that case, if someone just repeatedly is having suspicion and they're hurting their soul, I mean, the
Hmm.
wife could care less eventually, you know, until like maybe it escalates and you know, she's brought before like a judge or something, you know, Quranic judge to settle it, then then do it. Like you wouldn't have like if a husband was doing it on a daily basis, like she wouldn't have to swear 5 times each time, you know, in order to for him to believe him or something like I think like if you think about it like in a normal situation, like I don't even think that would happen, you know. Like if a husband really like followed the Quran and he was suspicious one time and then the wife swore 4 times and fifth time, you know, and then he does it again and he swears like he doesn't have to swear in this case, you know, but this case we see that the husband is swearing by God 4 times and then the fifth time shall be the wrath, you know. So
Okay,
this
I guess
shows,
it's more like
yeah.
testimony.
Yeah, it's a testimonial
uh,
thing. Yeah.
it is in a legal situation, because this surah has very legal aspects of this issue.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, because you know the husband, when he's being suspicious in a normal, let's everyday situation, he's when
Hmm.
he's gonna come to her and say, "I think you're having an affair," he's not gonna do the 4 times the 5 oaths. You know, he's not gonna do that. He's just gonna say, "I think you're having an affair" or something, and whatever, you know. But in this case, we see that when he accuses, then he has to swear 4 times that he's telling the
That
truth.
he's sure
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then she has, in her defense, then she has to swear 5 times.
Hmm. Hmm. So basically, if one of them is lying, can and the one is truthful, the truthful can basically invokes a curse upon the liar, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that
God
is,
will take
yes,
care of that.
that
That
is,
means.
yeah, because I think like
Mhm.
if you accuse your own spouse of something like that, I mean, you have to be
Very careful.
really
Yeah.
evil, you know?
So, I have a question: is that these applies to believers, right? If you live in a community where there are other religions and there are adulterers and adulteresses and all the different societies living in among them, but these rules only applies to the believers, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're living in a country that's, you know, you know, it's just you have a submitter nation, then you have, you know, the laws that are based upon that, you know. But if you, but that, you know, I think maybe in the future, when we have a country where, you know, everybody is a submitter, then you'd have these laws in place, you know, where someone comes and accuses you, then that shall be, you know, the set. Like for example, nowadays, if if you know someone is you know, if someone is you know, sued for character assassination, there's fines and stuff in place, right? For that, there's punishment in place for that. But you know, the judge decides based on the severity of the, you know, lies in this character assassination and all that, you know, like what kind of uh you know, fines shall be incurred. So in that case, like, you know, if you had a country where, you know, it was a submitted country and the laws were based on submission, then these laws could be put in place for anyone uh, who lives, who chooses to live in this country and, you know, abide by the laws. You know, like and same would be for the thief. You know, like you have a thief, and you can't say, well, the thief has to be a submitter for me to mark their hands, for example. You know, but if you have a submitter nation, obviously you'd have laws in place for all of these things. And so they would apply to people who live in that country. But obviously those laws are passed. I mean, laws are just not put in place without the will of the people. You know, people have to agree to adopt those laws too, right? That's how laws are put in place as well. So if you have a submitter country, then everybody will agree to have these laws in place, and then when a crime happens, then they're judged accordingly.
And I also think that it is about to save the community, and like if there's negativity going around, and slowly it can inflict the whole community, younger generation, and to protect them, for witnesses and lashing in front of public is to discourage people from doing any kind of bad activity openly, because when you have four witnesses, that means you have done something in openly. Behind doors, hidden, you do something. That's what I heard from someone, that it's between you and God, if you, and you can repent. But if you're going around and doing corruption and adultery and all that, where people can see you, that's where the four witnesses can come, and that's when you will be punished because you
Well,
are
of
doing it.
course,
And right.
yeah. I mean, of course, if you commit adultery and nobody knows about it, then who's gonna accuse you of it? Right? Nobody, most likely,
Like
because
earlier
you
you
don't
were
have
saying that
witnesses.
like you can come by yourself and admit that you did it.
No, I'm
Would you
saying
want?
if someone comes and admits it to you, just let's say you have a friend or someone, you know,
Mhm.
and he says, you know, well, you know, when I was not let's say I'm just hypothetically saying, like, say, you know, he could say, well, when I was in a submitter or someone, you know, like I did these things, you know,
Mhm.
that's different than someone who committed it yesterday and then comes and tells you, I committed adultery, I think I should be lashed. I mean, most likely that probably would not be, happen to anyone, you know, because if they did that, you know, they wouldn't want to go through the punishment and, be publicly humiliated, right?
Right.
They'll just want to secretly repent and reform. But
Right.
I was just saying,
They-
like, if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I committed this thing," I mean, it's not your job to prove it if they're already saying that they did it.
Yeah.
Also, if somebody wasn't submitter at the time, and God says he forgives all sins, including whatever it is. So after becoming a submitter would not do such a thing.
Mm.
I mean, it can happen, but basically, previous sins are already, God gives you a clean slate. That's God's promise. Masha Allah.
And also to clear that people may think that why would God do us punishment? First of all, these lashes are symbolic. It's just to humiliate the person and what they did. And second thing is that it would take, it will just not happen in everyday life. Someone has to bring four witnesses, and that is not an easy task
Mm.
against someone. You have to gather, and those four people have to be witnessing this action. It's not like I heard, or I heard he said that, or he heard. It's like when you're driving and there is an accident, if you didn't see it happening, you are not a witness. It has to be happening in front of you, and you can clearly see this person was doing wrong, and that you can go to the court. And if you go to the court, the judge will ask you, did you see it? And you say, no, I didn't see it, I heard it. They will say, get off the stand, you're not a witness. So
Mm.
in a real life situation, it would be almost clearly impossible to have four witnesses unless the person who did the adultery is doing it so publicly. And that is a very, very negative behavior. It can impact the whole society. The children and other people can watch and they can get wrong ideas. And it's pretty sad. We live in the time. I mean, there were, I've seen on the TV, teenagers were crying. They were saying that why it is happening to our time, when all these negative videos are easily accessible to anyone without even verification of age, and it's just messing up with their mind at very young age. You know which videos I'm talking about. And it's pretty sad time to live in those, that it's, there's nothing is being done to prohibit all this. It's openly available. And I know when we were growing up, you cannot access all that. It was,
You said children were crying?
yeah, there were some people came on TV a while back, and then this teenager, they were saying that all these negative videos are easily accessible to anyone who just, you just need a phone,
Mm.
and you can
Yeah.
access whatever stuff
Hmm.
you want. I mean,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
nobody
yeah,
cares.
exactly. It's up to the parents, obviously, like
Yeah.
to protect their children and put
Yes.
measures in place, like it's actually, well, pretty easy to restrict that type of content for their children when they give internet to them
Yeah.
nowadays.
But
But
children are a
yeah,
lot smarter
still,
than their parents
yeah,
nowadays.
yeah.
They can
Well,
bypass anything.
yeah, but still, it's again, the responsibility actually falls on the parents, as you
Right.
can see, in the appendix, which is, hold on, uh, appendix, I believe, is appendix 34. You know? So, I mean, I think as a parent, like, you really have to talk to your children all the time, and it says the true believer, it's in the last paragraph. It says the true believers who care about their children will advise them and remind them repeatedly and persistently to keep their chastity, and that's like 21:32. So if you see the verse 21:32, it says the parent's responsibility. It talks about you should enjoin your family to observe the contact prayers and steadfastly persevere in doing so. So obviously, you're going to remind them about God, and you're going to tell them to do their contact prayers and everything, and you're going to remind them to keep their chastity as well, as it says here. And it said this means staying a virgin until their wedding night, then staying loyal to one's spouse, never committing adultery for their own happiness. God's advice to keep our chastity before our and after marriage is for our own good. God is the one who controls our health, wealth, and happiness or misery. So, the children, and the Measure of the Covenant also talked about how, like, there's never really like a set age. It's never too early to talk to them about this. The sooner you start, the easier it is to talk to them and get in the habit of talking about them. Obviously, you talk to them at their level, but definitely once they're getting close to that age, like, you have to, like, tell them in pretty clear terms, like, this is what they have to do to protect themselves. But usually, I mean, of course, what happens is when parents don't do their responsibility, kids end up, they're kids, so they end up making wrong choices too. And I think for submitters, especially living in this age of information, when, like you said, you have everything available, yeah, it's up to the parents to educate their children in the proper way, advise them based on Quran.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are a believer, if you devote yourself to God, and God will take care of His part, and you do your job,
Hmm.
and you will have nothing to worry about.
Yeah,
Absolutely nothing to worry about in this world.
yeah, Masha
Uh, and so the my own point was to that if people think that this is the horrible punishment, it will never come to that point where you have to lash. It would have to be so many levels. It's like, this, because these things come up a lot, that in Islam you can hit your wife. No, it's just so many barriers. Like mentioned, the Covenant had explained to how it's symbolic, and you will shop them, you tell them to shop, discouraging them from something, and it's so many barriers. Similarly here, there's so many barriers in to get to that point. uh, in old times, it just would not happen, and somebody is really asking for that, or doing openly, and committing all these things, and know that this will happen. This person basically wants to be punished. Otherwise, it will not even happen. Nobody will just come in and accuse someone, because this person has to bring four witnesses. And if this person cannot bring four witnesses, and there is a punishment for that person too, right?
yeah,
Yeah, so most merciful, it does not advocate violence or anything. God wants to make things simple and easy for everybody,
yeah. But
and that's
people
pretty
do
much
get
it.
caught. People do get caught a lot of times. Like, let's say, somebody who's doing these things. Let's say they could be drunk or something, and they
Yeah.
they they don't they're not aware of their surroundings very well, and they get caught. And then, four or five people could walk in at the same time and witness it. It's quite possible.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be like, you don't find a better place. What's you doing here?
Yeah. Yeah, we
What
young
about
people, I mean, it's a common thing, right? In today's society. Yeah.
like nowadays? Four witnesses is to make sure that this thing is done. What if somebody brings a video that recorded? Okay, just one person, and this person has a valid recording that this act has happened. What about that?
Well, then the person who recorded the video is the witness, but obviously the people who saw the video, they're not considered witnesses, right? I mean, like the witness is a person who was actually there to witness it, right?
Yeah, also
Because
one witness.
yeah, that's one witness.
Mhm.
I mean, they have proof. If they have proof, that's good. But I think for the Quranic judgment to happen, they need other witnesses too.
Mhm.
Because nowadays it's very easy to make videos too. Like
Right.
you can make a video with someone and put like anybody's face on it.
Oh, that's true also now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be too expensive, to do that. If you wanted to frame someone,
Yes.
you would be willing to spend maybe a few $1,000s, even if you want to get 1 minute of footage of CGI effects.
Right.
And you could do that with photographs too. Then you don't. I mean, why just stop at videos? You which is even easier.
Right.
Yeah,
And they can put your face in,
yeah, yeah.
I
Photoshop
mean, yeah.
or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's like so many movies nowadays you can see, like, the people are dead, but they put their faces on, you know, to make them appear in those scenes,
Mhm.
and they basically recreate them, like coming in, greeting people and stuff like that, and talking to them. They're dead.
And just wanted to say how this surah starts. Um, like God is calling this surah, 24:1, a surah that we have sent down and we have decreed as law. So, this surah contains, and then God says, we have revealed in it clear revelations that you may take heed. I mean, of course, where the laws are defined, they have to be, must be clear for everybody to understand. But there's so much deviation from the religion has happened in traditional Islam that they they do not follow it exactly. They don't care about how many witnesses were produced, and this punishment for adultery goes all the way up to stoning to death. That is so
Mm,
barbaric, you know.
yeah.
It's like they want to rip people apart. And those
Mm,
who are stoning to death, who knows how many adulterers are there. But when it
mm,
comes to like carrying out barbaric acts, these people are ahead of everyone, you know. And God talks about obviously 100 lashes or 80 lashes. They're symbolic. Otherwise, the full strength, one cannot even handle one or two, you know. They will be passed out or possibly dead. The way they carry out, and the humiliation, in front of like outdoor, in a street. uh, the God says a group can be, and at an intimate, doesn't mean like it can be 10 people, 5 people, not like, oh, the whole city is watching. you know this is beyond. The person might never be able to reform. They might just psychologically die if they don't die a physical death. So it's so barbaric, this religion has become these days, wherever these punishments are being carried out. Countries like Iran and some they chop the head in Saudi Arabia. They just publicly they just sever the head. Where does that say? You know, the life is sacred. God calls life is sacred. You save a life, you've saved humanity. But here, every law they make, they just want to kill. You know, if the government didn't kill, people will lynch other people to death. And that's happens a lot in certain countries, you know. Something about blasphemy. There's a blasphemy law. They will just kill people and be very proud of it that they did a very noble job, and that will carry them to heaven. Um, yeah. So all these laws are clear here. There's no ambiguity in Quran and no confusion. Very straightforward and very precise. There should be no confusion left. Why would God make a law which is not clear to understand? You know, laws are simple. You know, you're driving a car, you know, the speed limit is 60 mile, you're going 80, you know what you're doing wrong. It's very simple, and you will get a ticket, and it's not like you would not understand. Hey, the law was 60 mile, why are you going more than that? So it's very simple. Simple, all laws are simple to understand when they're, you know, so such is God's law. Um, but sad, really sad that human life has no value in today's Islam, and everybody's out there to get blood on their hands. Where did you end, Solomon? What was the last?
And then in verse 26.
Oh, okay.
26, yeah,
I just want to make a small comment. Inshallah. Verse 19 says, "Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Those who love to see immorality spread among the believers have incurred a painful retribution in this life and in the hereafter. God knows while you do not know. God showers you with His grace and mercy. God is most kind towards the believers, most merciful." So these two verses talking about believers, and just imagine anyone who's trying to spread immorality among the believers. This is even far worse, I would think, if you look at it. 100 lashes is nothing compared to if you put 100 lashes on one side and the other side you put painful retribution in this life and in the hereafter. Now the 100 lashes becomes zero in front of painful retribution in this life and the hereafter. And God knows while you do not know. And then God says, God showers you with His grace and mercy. God is most kind towards the believers. God is most kind towards the believers, most merciful. So it's awesome that God is saying that if you are a believer, and somebody even is trying to harm you, spreading negativity about you, they will be the one who will be suffering. Imagine if you go touch the fire, fire's not gonna, you're gonna get hurt, not the fire. Or you, if you touch the hot wires like the electric, you're gonna get be electrocuted, not the electric. So when these people, so you don't have to worry about anything basically. All you strive to be, like the previous surah that we were studying is about believers. So you do your best as possible to be in that group of believers. Then what happens? God is most kind towards the believers. So you in the mercy, grace, and kindness of God, And while anybody say any negativity about you, you don't even have to worry about anything. Let them say they are hurting themselves. You are in the protection of God, full 100% protection. Nothing. I mean, these are reinforced over and over and over in the Quran. That absolute happiness now and forever. Different ways God is enforcing these systems for us to understand that all you need to do is just stay in this group, and you'll, it's like a tornado is coming and they say just stay in this room. This you will be protected. If you go outside the room, then there's no protection. And those who do the, immoral things against believers, they should read it and ponder upon what they're doing. And I'm not sure if people, what is the forgiveness on those, because we clearly read in Surah number 4, um, whereas God is telling you it's in the war zone, where God says if you accidentally in battlefield kill a believer, there's the steps you can go to repent. You have to, I don't know, fast or something. There's so many steps you can do, and then you repent. But if you kill a believer intentionally, oh my God, then the next verse. God is one after another. God is saying, I have condemned this and that, and there's a retribution coming, and like there's not even a mentioning of any forgiveness for that person. God is saying, because the first verse is that if you do that, then these the steps you can do. But on the next one, when he said you do intentionally, then it's just retribution from God, and very severe retribution from God. I'm not sure what verse. I can pull it up if somebody wants to know. Masha Allah.
Yeah, it's a 493.
Yeah, Masha Allah. Yeah, I mean, if you kill intentionally, then that's,
Unforgivable offense.
oh yes.
Yeah, not only that, also, God says those who persecute, the believing men and women, and then, well, at least that's for that you can repent.
Right. Yeah, I see two places where while because you can anytime repent and come back to God, but I mean, I don't know, there are probably more instances, but there are two instances where I see that while you're still alive, your death hasn't come yet, but forgiveness is forbidden on you. This is one of them, 492. And the other one is if somebody becomes a believer and leave submission and then come back and then leave and go further into the disbelief. And for those people, God says, God will not forgive them, right?
Mm. We're talking about the verse that says those who believe then disbelieve.
Disbelieve and then come back to believe and then further fall into disbelief. God will not forgive them. Something I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
surely those who believe then disbelieve, then plunge deeper into disbelief, God will not forgive them, nor will he guide them in any way.
right. So this person has no hope left, but this person still be
They're
alive.
hypocrites. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
hypocrites. Yeah.
But God says God will not. God has issued a law that God will not
Yeah.
guide them. If God doesn't guide you, no one can. You will never be guided.
Says they're the ones who ally themselves with the disbelievers instead of the believers. Are they seeking dignity with them? All dignity belongs with God alone. Yeah. Such a common occurrence. That one
Right.
too.
But this 492, it makes you feel so personal with God. Like, it's like God is saying that if you do anything to these people, like, you want to be in that group where God is showering them with love and mercy, that God is so serious about this group of people, those called the true believers, that you feel like, oh my God, this is where the love is. This is, I want to be in the part of that God is so serious about these people. That people can go to hell by messing up with these people. Straightforward verses.
Do you guys have any more comments or questions, or do you think we should end the broadcast now?
Yeah, we can end it, inshallah now.
Okay.
I just have a small thing I want to
Okay,
make.
sure.
Just give me 1 second. Let me pull this up. Um, Okay, it's just a small thing I want to talk about that from a last study, and I was listening to it, and I noticed some people may have not understood that verse, that is 2390. We have given them the truth while they are liars, and I say that anything out of what God has sent us down, the message, the books and scriptures and prophets and messengers, anything out of it is a lie. What I meant by that is the about religion. Anybody who brings like Quran, anybody else bring anything else other than Quran, then they say this is a law that we have to follow, then that's a lie. We have to follow, and the final testament is the Quran, and that's the final law. But anything that God sent us, like in the previous scriptures, God sent the scripture and they were supposed to follow those laws. And anything people bring out of the religion, that becomes a lie, because God did not forbid or want us to do something that God, if God didn't say that and we bring it, then that's a lie. So I just want to clear that people will think that okay, then a lot of things is not in the book, like science and other stuff. But my focus was about the religion, that the topic is religion, and if somebody make new rules and something. Another point about this verse is that the truth, we have given them the truth, and the ultimate truth was there is only one God, and He has no partners in His kingdom, and that is the absolute truth. And anybody alters that truth is a lie. And as we know, just wanted to clarify on that.
Yes,
That's
Masha.
Thank you. Do you go back and listen to your study? Is that what happened?
yeah. Should I try to? You know what? You think even though you listen to your own study, you learn.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing.
Mm. Yeah, a lot of times when I go back to old studies,
Yeah, yeah.
like yeah.
You listen to you listen to Quran or the
Hmm.
Quran studies from the Shah Khalifa and the sermons, and you just something you pick out that you say, yeah, I didn't pay attention to this one before.
Hmm. Yeah,
Sometimes you start
yeah.
adding things one to the other, and then you learn something new.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, the 492, the verse about believers. Masha Allah, I did a whole sermon about that topic.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Okay. So thank you guys for joining us on YouTube. God willing, our next study is going to be on Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, and our teacher is going to be who? This last one was Nudat or Adam. So I think Nudat, do you think you might be able to do?
Yeah, yes, it's me
Okay,
again,
okay,
inshallah.
inshallah. Okay, thank you. So, okay, God
Yeah.
bless you all. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Our next teacher
Alaikum.
is going to be Nudat, God willing. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu